There is a specific kind of quiet in the room where they decide whether you go home. I had waited years to sit in that chair, rehearsed it 1,000 times on my bunk, and when the day finally came, I walked in with the one word I was certain would carry me through, and that word was sorry. I was going to tell them I was sorry, deeply, truly sorry, and I believed the way a man believes something he has never tested, that being sorry was the thing they were looking for, that if they could just see how much I regretted it, they would open the door. I sat down at that table across from people holding my whole life in a folder, and I said my sorry, and I meant every word of it, and they denied me. Not because they doubted I was sorry, they denied me because being sorry, it turns out, is not what that room is for, and it took me that denial and years afterward to understand what actually is. Tonight I want to walk you through my first parole hearing, what I got wrong, why regret alone will never open that door, and what the people at that table are actually listening for underneath the word everyone brings them. Because almost every man walks in the first time believing what I believed, and almost every one of them learns the same hard way I did. Let me set the ground the way I always do. This was my hearing, in my state, in my era, and parole works differently from place to place. Some states more than others, some boards harder or softer, some systems with rules mine never had. So take this as one man's experience, not a legal guide, because I am not a lawyer and the specifics of your state or your loved one's state matter more than anything I can tell you. And I am not here to game anything for anybody, because the whole lesson of this video is the opposite of gaming. It is that the thing that actually works in that room is the one thing you cannot fake. So take this as what it is, a man telling you what he learned the hard way about a door that most people never see the inside of. Before I walk you into the room, let me take the movie out of your head, because it aims you at the wrong thing. Film shows the parole hearing as a dramatic monologue, the prisoner pouring out his heart, a tear, a swell of music, the board moved by the sheer force of his sincerity, and the door opens because he said the right emotional thing at the right moment. That is not how that room works, and believing it is how men lose. There is no monologue that saves you. The board is not an audience to be moved. It is closer to a panel of risk assessors reading a file, and the sincerity that Hollywood makes the whole story is, to them, the least reliable thing in the room, because they have watched sincere men reoffend and cold men go straight, and they learn not to trust the performance. If you walk in expecting to move them, you have already misunderstood the room. They are not there to be moved. They are there to be convinced, which is a completely different thing, and convincing requires evidence, not emotion. Let me take you into the room first, because you should feel it. It is not a courtroom, not usually. It is smaller and plainer than that, sometimes just an office, sometimes a video screen because the board is somewhere else entirely. There is a table, there are the people who will decide, and there is a file, and that file is thicker than you. It holds your whole case, your whole record inside, every write-up, every program, every year. In the words of people who are not you, you have waited years for these few minutes. And here is the first thing nobody prepares you for. The decision is, in a real sense, mostly already made before you open your mouth, because it is written in that file, in the record you built over all those years. And the few minutes you get to speak are not the main event. They are the last small chance to confirm or contradict a story the file has already been telling. I did not understand that walking in. I thought the hearing was a speech, my chance to move them with my words. It is not a speech. It is a test of whether the man talking matches the record sitting on the table, and I had spent years preparing the speech and not nearly enough years building the record, which is exactly backwards, and it is the first mistake, and most men make it. So let me tell you what I said and why it failed, because the failure is the whole lesson. I told them I was sorry. I told them I regretted what I had done, that I thought about it, that I wished I could take it back. All of it true. And I watched it land on them like water on a stone, because here is what I did not understand. Every single person who sits in that chair says they are sorry. Everyone. The board has heard the word sorry 10,000 times from men who meant it and men who did not, and they learned long ago that the word tells them almost nothing. Because being sorry is easy. Being sorry is what any human being feels sitting in a cage wanting to go home, and it does not answer the one question that room actually exists to answer, which is not, are you sorry? It is, are you safe to release? Those are completely different questions, and I had spent years preparing an answer to the wrong one. Sorry is about the past, about how you feel regarding a thing you already did. The board is about the future, about whether the person in front of them is likely to do it again. And regret, all by itself, is not evidence about the future, because plenty of men are genuinely sorry and still walk out and do the same thing. So a board that released people on the strength of sorry would be releasing people on nothing at all. They know that. I did not. So what is that room actually listening for? Underneath the sorry. And this is the heart of everything I learned. There is a word for it, and it is the single most important word in this entire subject, and it is insight, not remorse, insight. The board wants to know that you understand deeply and specifically why you did what you did. Not that you regret it, but that you have done the hard interior work of figuring out what in you, what thinking, what pattern, what unhealed thing, what choices led you to that act. Because a man who genuinely understands why he did it is a man who can recognize the warning signs and choose differently next time, and a man who only feels bad about it has no such map and is therefore, from the board's point of view, still a risk, no matter how sincere his sorrow. That was the thing I could not give them at my first hearing, because I had spent my years feeling sorry instead of understanding. I could tell them that what I did was wrong. I could not yet tell them, in real and specific terms, why I had done it, what it revealed about who I had been, and exactly how I had changed the thinking that produced it. And without that, my sorry was just a feeling, and feelings are not what that room releases people on. It releases people on evidence of change, and insight is the beginning of that evidence, and I did not have it yet. I learned exactly how good they are at seeing through a rehearsed answer at that first hearing in a single moment I have never forgotten. I had my sorrow ready, polished, and I delivered it, and then one of the people at that table asked me a simple follow-up, just why? Why did you do it? And I did not have a real answer, because I had never actually done the work of finding one. I had only practiced feeling bad, and so I said something about a bad decision, a mistake, being in the wrong place, the kind of empty phrases a man uses when he has felt regret but never examined himself. And I watched them write something down, and I knew in that second that I had failed, because the follow-up question is where the performance dies. Anyone can deliver a prepared apology. Almost no one can survive the honest follow-up unless the understanding underneath it is real, and mine was not, and they knew it before I finished the sentence. That one question taught me more about that room than years of rehearsing had, because it showed me that they were not listening to my words. They were probing for what was underneath them, and underneath them, at that point, there was nothing but sorrow and air. And here is the second layer, the one that goes with insight, and that I learned even later. The board does not just want to hear the insight, they want to see it proven in the record, the file on the table, because talk is the cheapest thing in a prison, and everyone at that table knows it. This is where the years actually get decided long before the hearing. What did you do with your time? Did you complete the programs? The ones that address exactly the thing that put you there, the anger, the addiction, the thinking, the education you were missing. Did you keep your record clean, or is it full of write-ups that say you have not changed at all? Did you take on work, responsibility, anything that shows a pattern of a different man over years and not just a rehearsed speech in a 5-minute window? Because the record is the evidence and the hearing is just the closing argument, and I walked in with a weak record and a strong speech, and that is a losing hand every time. The men who walked out were, again and again, the ones who had spent their years building a record that told the story of change before they ever opened their mouths, so that when they sat down and spoke their insight, the file on the table nodded along with them. I want to make the record point concrete, because it is where a hearing is really won or lost, and men do not believe it until too late. Picture two men with nearly identical crimes and identical sorrow sitting the same board a week apart. One spent his years taking every program the place offered that touched the reason he was there, held a steady work assignment, kept his disciplinary record nearly clean, and slowly, provably became a different man on paper year over year. The other felt terrible about what he did the entire time and did none of it, collected write-ups, drifted, and showed up to the hearing with a heartfelt speech. Same crime, same sorrow. The board will treat them completely differently, and it should, because one of them has years of evidence that he changed and the other has a feeling and a speech. That is the thing I most wish someone had made me understand in my early years. That the hearing is not where you win parole, it is where you present the parole you already earned or failed to earn in the long, quiet years nobody was watching. The work is done in the ordinary days, not the dramatic minutes, and by the time you are in the chair, the story is mostly written. My file did not nod along with me. It sat there contradicting my nice words with the plain record of a man who had been marking time instead of doing the work, and the board reads the file, not the speech. There is a third piece, and it is the one people find hardest to hear, and it involves the person you harmed. A parole hearing is not only about you, and the mistake so many men make, the mistake I made, is walking and thinking entirely about their own freedom and their own sorrow, as if the hearing were about them. But there was a victim, or victims, or a family, and in many systems they can speak, they can send statements, they can be in that room, and the board is thinking about them the entire time. And a man who has real insight understands the harm he caused, not as an abstraction, not as the reason he got locked up, but as a real thing that happened to real people who did not deserve it and are still living with it. The difference between a man saying, "I am sorry for what I did," and a man who can speak specifically and without excuse about the actual harm to the actual people is the difference the board is trained to hear, because the first is about the man's own guilt, and the second is about genuine understanding of another person's suffering. And only the second sounds like someone who has truly changed. I could not do that fully at my first hearing either, because I was still, underneath all my sorrow, mostly thinking about myself. And that room can tell. And there is a fourth piece, a practical one that men overlook because it feels less important than the emotional parts, and it is the release plan. The board is deciding whether to put you back into the world, and they want to know exactly what you are going back to, because a man with nowhere to live, no work, no support, and no plan is a man far more likely to end up right back inside, and the board knows that better than anyone. Where will you live? Who is out there for you? How will you make money legally? What will you do differently, concretely, in the actual daily life you are asking them to return you to? A vague "I will do better" is worth nothing. A specific, realistic, supported plan is worth an enormous amount because it is more evidence about the future, which is the only thing that room cares about. I did not have much of a plan at my first hearing because I had spent all my preparation on my feelings and none on the practical reality of the life I was asking for, and that too was part of why the door stayed shut. So let me put the boundary in here plainly, because I always do, and it matters more on this subject than most. None of what I am telling you is a script, and if you take it as one, you have missed the entire point. The board's whole job is to tell the difference between a man who has genuinely changed and a man who has learned to perform change, and they are very good at it because they do this all day for years, and they have heard every rehearsed speech there is. The insight I am describing cannot be faked, because a faked insight collapses the moment they ask a follow-up question you did not rehearse, and they will ask it. So this is not a video about what to say. It is a video about what to become, and then the saying takes care of itself. Because a man who has actually done the interior work and built the record simply tells the truth about it, and the truth in that room is the only thing that has ever reliably worked. I am not teaching you to sound safe. I am telling you what it actually takes to be safe and to be able to show it, which are the same thing, which is the whole point. Let me be honest about the limits, because this system is not simple and not always fair. A good record and real insight and a solid plan improve a person's chances. They do not guarantee anything, because parole boards weigh the severity of the original offense heavily, and for some crimes, the door is very hard to open, no matter what a man becomes. And there are real questions about how fairly these decisions get made, about who gets believed and who does not, about bias and inconsistency from board to board and state to state. I am not telling you the system is fair or that doing everything right always works, because it does not. What I am telling you is that walking in with only sorrow, the way I did, is walking in with the weakest possible hand, and that the things that actually move that room, insight, a record that proves change, understanding of the harm, and a real plan, are things worth building regardless, because they are the actual substance of becoming a person who will not come back, whether or not the board sees it the first time. And here is the turn, because there is one, and it surprised me. Doing the real work, the insight, the programs, the honest reckoning with the harm I caused did not just eventually help me at a later hearing. It changed me, for real. And that turned out to be the point I had missed entirely. I had treated the whole thing as a performance to get out, and the parole board, without meaning to, forced me toward something better, which was actually understanding myself and actually changing, because that was the only thing that would ever open the door. The sorry I walked in with the first time was real, but it was shallow, a feeling floating on the surface. What I was forced to build underneath it over the following years, the actual understanding of why I had done what I did and the actual work of becoming different, was the thing that made the sorry mean something at last. And I've come to think the board's refusal to accept mere sorrow is not cruelty, it is wisdom, because it refuses to let a man out on a feeling and insists he do the harder work of real change. And that insistence, though I hated it at the time, is part of what saved me. I want to hear from you on this one. If you have been through a parole hearing or waited for someone who was, what did you learn about that room that surprised you? If you work in the system, on any side of it, your view of what actually moves these decisions would help people here more than mine. And for everyone, the real question under this is bigger than parole. It is this: what is the difference between being sorry for something and actually understanding why you did it? And have you ever done the second, harder thing about a mistake in your own life? Sit with that. No case details, no names, nothing that costs anyone anything. Next time, I want to talk about the release plan itself, the actual mechanics of walking back into a world that changed while you were gone. Because getting the yes from the board is only the beginning, and the plan you promised them is a thing you then have to actually live, and that is its own hard story. I will end back in that quiet room at that table with the file that was thicker than me. I walked in the first time believing my words would carry me, and I walked out understanding that the words were never the point, the record was, and the change behind the record was, and the insight behind the change. Sorry is where it starts. It is not where it ends. And a room built to protect the public cannot afford to treat a feeling as if it were proof. It took me a denial to learn that, and years to build what the denial demanded. And by the time I sat at that table again, I did not go in with a speech. I went in with a different man, and I let the record speak for him, and I told the truth about what I finally understood. That is the whole lesson. They are not asking you to be sorry. Anyone can be sorry. They are asking you to be different and to prove it, and there is no word in any language that does that work for you. Only the years do, and only if you spend them right